All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Circuit Stream's AR for Everyone workshop and webinar. It's always a pleasure to have you all joining us on these workshops and webinars. But before I do continue along, please let me know in the chat, can you hear me and see me? I do want to do a quick AV check, audio visual check. So I have Kenyero, yes, Ritesh, yes, John Lopez, Ren, Unot, Igor, Ali, yeses all around. Karen, nice to see you again, Karen. Thank you all for letting me know. So a few housekeeping items before we continue along with this workshop and webinar. So as you've seen, there is a chat box to the right there. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves, ask questions if you would like, though questions I would prefer for you to put into the questions tab. It allows us to really track what we haven't answered, what is missing, as we do have an in-depth Q&A session at the very end of this workshop and webinar. Now, beside the questions tab where you put all your questions for us to cover throughout the workshop, and at the end, there is a polls tab as well. So I'll be tossing in polls just to gauge the experience level of the audience here today, see how familiar you are with Unity, some other things as well. And then we'll get going from there on. But again, thank you everyone for joining us on another exciting Circuit Stream workshop and webinar. I see John Lopez, shout out in the chat. Nice to see you again as well, John. And now I do want to ask everyone who's currently attending, and we're going to wait to see how many more people join us here, but let me know where you're currently tuning in from. I love to see where in the world people are joining us from. I myself am located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. That's where Circuit Stream is headquartered out of. But I do see Kenyero here from Belgium, Winnipeg, another Belgium lead. Few Belgium leads, actually. Sweden, Oregon, North Carolina. Shout out from Austin, Texas, and Florida. So London, UK as well. Calgary, Jen, nice to see you from Calgary. Glasgow. So it looks like a lot of people from all over the world again, mainly North America, some UK, Europeans as well. Thank you all for joining us. I know it might be quite late on your end. Now, for those of you who are tuning in from abroad and internationally, we do record all of our workshops and webinars, and we send them out to everyone who had registered. So if you got to go to sleep, if you have to wake up in the morning to have breakfast, make those eggs, no worries. We'll be sure to send you the recording to review on your own time. Now, in the chat, I also have some colleagues of mine backstage. I have Kyle, Vlad, Dayon. We might have Eric in the background as well, various other colleagues of ours. So team, say hi in the chat there, and they're more than happy to help support you along the way as well. But without further ado, let's get going. My name is Stefan, and I am on the education team here at Circuit Stream. I have over 6 years of experience in the tech industry, working with travel IT companies, learning management system companies, business integration platforms and ERPs, and now in the world, the beautiful world of augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, an icebreaker and fact about myself that I mention on all our workshops and webinars, some of you might be a little tired of it. I was a member of Water Polo Canada, trained with the 2008 Beijing Olympic team, never got to go to the Olympics, but a great experience nonetheless. Now, today I will be joined by my colleague, Eric Carter, who will be leading that AR for Everyone portion later on, kind of in the next 5-10 minutes here. Eric is our head of design here at Circuit Stream and the principal VR AR designer. He has over 15 years of design experience working with Oculus and Microsoft. He was actually part of the team that created the little hummingbird that floats over when you launch your HoloLens device. So if you have any questions about anything Oculus or Microsoft related, design the HoloLens devices, Eric's your man. Feel free to toss it in the chat or the questions tab, and we're more than happy to help you all out. Now, an interesting fact about Eric, just recently, he got a second metal collarbone. So you can say that he's basically Iron Man here. But I know he's quite proud of that. If you punch him in the collarbone, chances are you'll break your own knuckles. But it's a pleasure and an honor to have Eric join us and to lead this next aspect of the presentation there. Now, before I get into who we are and what we do here at Circuit Stream, I would love to invite you all to Circuit Stream's virtual open house that will be hosted tomorrow. Just briefly, we'll be going through the new 7 short courses that we had launched, talking more about our larger in-depth programs, what you can expect, success stories led by our founder, Lou, here at Circuit Stream, answering any questions anyone may have, what to look for in terms of careers, what the future looks like with this technology, and really the next steps to get going in the world of VR and AR. Now, who we are, what do we do here at Circuit Stream? Well, Circuit Stream was founded in 2015 when everyone was on the hype train to build VR and AR applications and projects. We noticed the gap in actually helping people learn how to create these projects and experiences themselves. And since 2015, we've taught over 30,000 people how to create virtual reality and augmented reality projects from scratch in Unity. Now, we're a team of about 20 located all over the world, mainly in North America, with some in South America, Europe, and Asia. And we're all experts and professionals in devices, engines, platforms out there. The HTC devices, the Oculus devices, HoloLens, Microsoft platforms, the Unreal and Unity engine. If you have any questions ever for our team about any of the topics there, let us know. This is what we live for and what we love doing, helping people out. Now, Circuit Stream is a Unity certified training partner. Now, training partners are approved based on their expertise, focus on quality education, and commitment to providing the highest level of training available. Circuit Stream is also an official channel partner with Unity, and that means we deliver training and application development services in the architecture, engineering, construction, automotive, transportation, and manufacturing markets. Now, there's 3 things that we really do here at Circuit Stream. The first, and the one that we started off in 2015, pioneering online education in the XR space, has been our online courses, training, and educational opportunities. And these are some of our partners and some of the students we've had join us coming from these companies to learn more about how to create these projects, manage it at their workplaces, implement it, and continue innovating and elaborating on them. Now, we've typically done this through 2 courses. The one we've held since 2015 and adapting in recent years, our XR development with Unity course. It's 10 weeks long, 4 hours a week for 40 hours total of instruction, and all project-based, helping you create your own ideas and projects to add to your portfolio and to show to others. Also project-based, our quote-unquote advanced course and program, the XR Project Accelerator course. This one is 8 weeks long with 6 hours of instruction per week, also designed to help take your projects to the next level if you have that Unity and C# experience, not starting from scratch. Now, what differentiates us from those other educational platforms and services out there? It's our one-on-one support and mentorship, where we help each and every one of our students build their own ideas and projects out into a prototype or some sort of finished product to add to those portfolios, to bring to work, to show as a proof of concept, show family and friends, whatever it may be. Now, the second thing that we do here at Circuit Stream alongside education is content creation. So all of our instructors are current AR and VR developers, helping other organizations around the world create VR and AR projects for their workplaces. And these are some of our partners that we're currently working with to help implement and create XR immersive experiences at their workplace. Now, the third thing that we do at Circuit Stream, alongside the education and training, as well as the content creation, is a platform that we launched in the winter of last year that allows people to host their AR and VR applications on, scale, distribute, and manage those projects, as well as to track, measure, and analyze learning activities. Essentially, if I create a project here and I want to share it to my family in Europe, I would just upload it to the platform, give them link and access to it, and now they can play around with my project from the comfort of their own home. Now that you've learned a little bit about us and what we do here at Circuit Stream, why are you all here today? What are you going to learn? Well, today you're going to learn how to increase the accessibility of AR applications. You'll also learn how to use the right platforms that make an application usable by the widest number of people, as well as how to use multimodal interactions to allow users to work around limitations of all types. And then again, at the very end of this presentation, I'll wrap it up quickly. We'll bring Eric back on stage and we'll have our in-depth Q&A session. So if you have any questions for us to answer, toss them into the questions tab. It's what we love to do. So I'm going to toss into a poll here, and I always love asking this on all of our workshops and webinars, is how much experience with Unity do you have on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 being, I've never heard of Unity before. 10 being that you're the Jedi Master Chuck Norris of Unity. So I did toss in a poll. Let me know in the polls tab what your experience level is there. I do see some people tossing into the chat, a few ones, a 0. And just looking at the polls tab here, looks like it's also a mix of the same. Beginners with Unity, we've got a 5, 6 hanging around in there as well, so intermediate levels. But no worries, it's an intro to AR for everyone today. Now, for those of you who said 0, what is Unity? Well, Unity is a free 3D development engine for building games, simulations, and experiences. It's the easiest way to begin making apps for XR. Now, XR stands for extended reality, and that's the umbrella term for both virtual reality and augmented reality. You could also include MR, mixed reality, in that as well. It's just a short term to really include and encompass the entire technology and industry here. And how does one person actually go about creating their own AR app or a VR app? Well, you have an idea, which is this little light bulb here, and you take that idea and you bring it into a creation engine like Unity. That's where you start creating your project and your idea, optimizing it. And once it's ready to go, you push it out to one of the SDKs, which is then pushed out to the relevant headset that you had created it for. So again, you have an idea, you bring it into Unity, you create it, you push it out with an SDK into a headset, and voila, you're able to use your own projects that you've created in Unity. Now, today is about augmented reality for everyone, really diving into the importance of accessibility in the AR space, interactions to overcome differing abilities, direct manipulation, hand raise, color blindness, and language localization. And I would love to take this time to invite my colleague Eric onto the stage here. Again, it's a pleasure and an honor to have Eric join us, our head of design here at Circuit Stream, who worked at Oculus and Microsoft. Eric, great seeing you as always here. So again, Eric's going to take some time to go through the AR for everyone, helping you all maximize your audience in this space. I'll come back, take 5 minutes to wrap it up and conclude it, and then we'll open it up for an in-depth Q&A session at the very end here. So Eric, take it away. You're all in good hands, and I'll catch you all soon.
Thanks, Steph. Can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly enough? Just throw that in chat to make sure that my mic is working. Yeah, all right. So I'm here to talk to you about making AR for everyone. Everybody wants to maximize their audience and reach as many people as they can with their AR app. And I think in my experience developing lots of different applications in the games industry and in the tools and software industry, and as well as AR and VR, I found a lot of different ways that you can really expand the capability of your app to reach more people. So I want to share those with you today. And just to give you kind of a background, some sense of what that came from. So I've worked on applications that have had 25 million users. I've had my applications localized into 15 different languages. I've published on 9 different device platforms. I've used 7 different interaction modalities. These are all things that have allowed me in my past projects to reach bigger and bigger audiences. And I think, a number like 25 million users is a pretty great audience, right? If you could capture that with your app, you're doing really well for yourself. So I'm really excited to be able to share kind of these lessons from my experience with you guys. And I love this format because normally I'm teaching classes for Circuit Stream that are a lot smaller. There's like 10 or 20 people, sometimes even fewer than that. There's 8 people in chat, and then also a lot of one-on-one time. And this is a cool format where I get to talk to like hundreds of people at once. So I really enjoy these workshops. But let's just dive in and say, let's think on a very fundamental level. If we want to get the maximum audience, we want to like reach out. What is the first question you should ask yourself when you start designing a new app? Let's just go ahead and throw those in chat. I'll read a couple of them out. Whatever you think is the first question when you're opening up a new application, when you're starting a new project, what should you be asking yourself? Who are we designing for? What problem are you trying to solve? How to reach the maximum people? Who's my audience? Jeff Lewis, you nailed it. That's my very next slide. I think this is one of the key things that we need to constantly be going back to, because who's your audience totally frames everything that you do in your app. Is this going to be useful to the person who's buying it, paying for it, whether it's free to play or pay up front? There's always somebody who's engaging you in some value proposition, right? And our hope is that we can create apps that allow us to get to those people and provide some value to them, so they will give us their money or patronize our art or whatever motivates it to you. But ultimately it comes back to that: who are you sharing? What do they want? What are their goals? What are they trying to achieve? So I want to say that audience question, who is your audience, what does your audience want, is actually more important in XR than anything we've ever designed before. It's more intimate and it's more fundamental because XR is the most human factor design we've ever done. Why do I think that? Well, so here's what I want to say is this is kind of the core piece, right, about why XR is more about the audience, more human factor than anything else. Is fundamental to XR, and AR in particular, is we ground human bodies in computing space in a way we never have before. So let's break that down. I'm probably using to ground in a weird way that you haven't heard before. So I define grounding in mixed reality as the act of bringing a user into mixed reality by allowing physical objects, such as their hands or controllers or tracked objects or physical surfaces like this tabletop, to influence or manipulate the virtual elements, those computery things that only exist inside of a game engine, only exist in your graphics card. And this process of bringing a user into kind of that virtual space, the virtual world, contributes to a sense of presence, right? They feel like they're there in that place. And that's, I think, one of the two most important things about either an AR or a VR app or any kind of mixed reality, right, is that I've been brought into this imaginary world that is completely made up by computers. And that magical capability, that potential to be anything, is what matters about XR, VR, AR, mixed reality. And so let's go back to our understanding of why I'm claiming XR is the most human factor design. We are literally grounding human bodies, not just human inputs, not just voice, not just text. We're grounding human bodies in computing space in a way we never have before. There are very few things that allow our bodies to be direct inputs, the way we move and the way we speak. And the revolution towards XR is all about that transformation of computing. But the problem is, when it comes to AR, is a lot of times those sensors are kind of a weakness. If somebody can't take advantage of your hand tracking, or they don't speak the language of your voice recognition, they can't use your app in any way whatsoever. In other settings, there are ways to work around this. But in the total human computer system of AR, you have to bring in your hands or your head, and you have to ground the environment. And on some AR platforms like HoloLens, even your eyes become an important part of interacting with that system. And what this quickly reveals is how drastically different other people's normal bodies often are. I had a very interesting experience when I was working at Microsoft. where one of our engineers has like an eye alignment issue that he had never thought of as a disability. He can't see 3D depth using the same like eye adjustment that the rest of us can do. He sees a much more 2D world, and he perceives depth through things like shading from the atmosphere or shadowing or overlaps. But when you put a HoloLens on him, the only cues for depth that we give a user were cues that are based on the offset of your eyes. But because his eyes were different than most people's eyes, he couldn't see depth. And for the first time in his life, he couldn't use computer interfaces in the same way because he couldn't tell what buttons were over the top or in front of other buttons. And he told me that this was the first time in his life that he felt like this ocular condition that he had was a disability. The first time in his life, like my software made him feel that way. That's like a really powerful transition of your own identity, right? That our technologies can change the way people think about themselves and what it means to be disabled, or even just temporarily disabled. You know, if you have an eye patch because you had laser surgery, you know, now your eye tracker doesn't work. There are also cases where I think these new sensors reveal sort of different abilities, things that we wouldn't in any context think of as disabled or incapable, but it's just one thing that I can do, you maybe can't do, but instead you can do something else. And so we're going to dive into all of these systems and try to understand how we can make these more adaptable so that we can reach a larger audience. So first, I want to talk about like what it means to actually reach a large audience. One very great tradition in design, something that goes back quite a few decades, is this idea that there's a curb cut effect. Back in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, a lot of urban planners, which is a subdiscipline of design, started the population of disabled people who were like physically disabled, who were in wheelchairs and couldn't walk, shot up after World War II. And a lot of cities had to deal with the fact that, hey, a lot more people are in wheelchairs now. And so at the time, all cities were built with curbs that were just flat like this. And you can imagine how terrifying it must be to roll up what is essentially a cliff as far as your locomotion method is concerned, and then to somehow navigate that down into a street while people are walking around you and cars are driving. And so there was a movement to make these cuts into, oh my gosh, I haven't been showing you my slides this whole time. Thank you, MoMA. I've been showing you pictures. Anyway, this is the first picture. This is the cliff that I mentioned. The rest were just words. So here we are. You can see this curb is cut out so that if you come up to it with a wheelchair, you can much more easily navigate down onto the street. So the side effect of this is what we call the curb cut effect. And it's this idea that we built these curb cuts originally for people in wheelchairs, but over time, we quickly noticed that, you know, people pushing strollers or carts or people riding bicycles or skateboards all benefited from these cutout curves. It turns out that, you know, when you're on a bicycle, you have a differing ability set than somebody on foot. Your ability set is much closer to somebody on a wheelchair. And so by adding more people to our audience, not only do we add those people who have that specific disability that we're targeting, we're also adding people with different capabilities. So there's a multiplicative effect of making our applications more accessible to people. So I want to talk a little bit about this from a different angle, right? Hand tracking is something that is, I think, part of the core dream, the fantasy of AR. You know, but the reality is about 0.2% of users have some permanent disability. So this is a person who made the front page of Reddit for saying, you know, I'm finally standing up and being proud of who I am. He has a hand with like a missing finger and some like different shape. The reality is this guy probably never going to be able to use hand tracking with that hand. And it's easy to think about this as 0.2% of your users. That's a super small group, which, you know, maybe you can still be profitable with 0.2% fewer users. But I want to think about these problems a lot differently. And I think it's important to think about these problems differently in AR, because these hands are also not capable of using hand tracking. This kind of mixed material and mixed shaped gloves are going to throw off almost every hand tracker. And so when you think about, well, what percentage of my audience might wear gloves at some point in their life because they're cold, it's quick to realize that's 100% of your users. That all of us, as we interact with computers that better understand our body, begin to have temporary disabilities, the inability to interact with one or more aspects of computing. And as computing gets more complex, more and more of our normal behaviors can prevent our interactions. So I think as a designer, it's very important to get away from this idea that people with disabilities are a small niche or a small category that we can overlook. But like the curb cut effect, by supporting those very specific, clear user groups, we actually are expanding the audience of our application far beyond the number of people who have that specific disability that we're targeting. So that's kind of the framework that I want to talk about and look at accessibility in all of my apps and throughout the rest of this talk. So at the beginning, I talked about how the sensors are the weakness, right? If your sensors can't pick up your hands, then they're not going to be able to do hand tracking. And in AR, this new technology relies so much on these sensors, and really that's the magic, right? That's the grounding that makes us feel present in these virtual realities. But in traditional computing, the way we dealt with that is we just adapted the way humans did input. If you didn't have muscle control to do fine motor buttons, we just made bigger buttons. Or if you couldn't use a mouse, maybe we could use a joystick, or even on the side there's a mouth-controlled input device. And so we've spent decades coming up with this whole arsenal of different input modalities and different ways that you can essentially provide mouse and keyboard input, right? And then we forced humans and input devices to adapt to the kind of inputs that computers expected. But I think AR is a little different, because rather than just plugging another device in, all of these devices are amazing sensor platforms, right? I talked about the magic of AR comes from those sensors. It comes from understanding the world and bringing real world inputs into the virtual world. Well, all those sensors are just as capable and of as many inputs as all of those various devices that I showed on the last slide. There's more input and output capability on a HoloLens than all of those computer inputs combined. So we can use all of those sensors to solve so many physical differing abilities. And so this is an example of a photo from the Mixed Reality Toolkit, which shows how a single button, that's like what the user wants to do, right? They want the outcome of that button. But if I can't use hand tracking because I'm wearing gloves or I'm holding groceries in both hands, how do I deal with that? So in MRTK, Mixed Reality Toolkit, they support a whole bunch of different interaction modalities. So you can use voice and you say, activate the button. You can use your hand raise, where you can shoot this beam out from your hand to very far away. And if you can't get up and move to where an item that you want to interact with is, you can just laser beam your way with an interaction from far away. You can directly manipulate. Maybe you can't speak right now because you're in a library, but you can reach out and touch those buttons. Or you can do two-handed manipulate and move and position. And so whenever I'm thinking about expanding my audience, my default route is to support all these input modalities. Because even if one of them seems like the superior choice, maybe hand raise is great. You're sitting at your desk and you just da-da-da-da. You never know when one of those modalities isn't going to be usable by one of your users. And so everything we build in AR needs to use as many modalities as we can. If you're building phone AR, is there a way that you can use the accelerometer to provide input? Is there a way that you can use voice? All AR devices are rich with sensors, and by allowing input through all of those sensors, we're expanding the audience of people who can use our application. But it's not just input. Output also has to be accessible. So you've probably seen these color plates before. This is a test to identify color blindness in people. So if you're colorblind, you'll look at these circles, and what you'll see is just a blob full of lots of different dots that are not differentiable. But if you have color vision, I think it's 92% of people have full color vision, you can see these numbers where these dots kind of come together and make shapes, and you can see how the color differentiates from the other dots to make numbers. And this is an example of how different people experience a computer's output differently. And this group, just people with color blindness, that's 8% of the population. And so if I was an engineer and I walked into a boardroom and I said, I can expand our audience by 8%, everybody in that room would be interested in what I'm saying. And this is a relatively simple thing, adding colorblind support. So this is an example of Destiny 2 has really great colorblind support. And when I worked on Destiny, I learned kind of the story behind why we have such good colorblind support. Our lead UI engineer was colorblind. And so he always, in the original alpha version, struggled to play our game and to understand which players were on which teams, because the two colors looked the same to him. And he was personally very motivated by his own understanding of that difficulty. And he built this really robust system where you can choose what kind of color blindness you have. So if you have red-green color blindness or yellow-blue color blindness, it provides different options that make it easier for different users to tell colors apart. And this is the kind of thing that I think it's very important to think about up front. Like these kind of engineering solutions are a lot easier to build at the beginning and have a plan for. And then as you go, both designing kind of the visuals and artistic elements of your game, but also the technologies behind your game, you can continue to roll with that plan. Rather than if you ship your game and you realize later that people with color blindness have a hard time using your application, then you have to go back and retrofit everything and test everything. That's a lot harder process. So I always want to think about this as a designer, as somebody who does visual things. How do people with different visual abilities see my designs? How do people who have less clear vision, where everything's blurry, how do they interact with my designs? And by building plans for these early on, we can address a much larger audience cheaper. So there's another kind of category I mentioned earlier, which is not so much disabilities as different abilities. So one of these, I think kind of the perfect example of this is language skills. So I've been learning Chinese, and that's a new ability for me, but I definitely can't use applications in Chinese yet. I'm great in English, but any application that's published for Mandarin speakers, it's just out of reach for me. It's a non-starter. And language is not the only differing ability. There's any kind of fitness app has all sorts of different, how far can you run? What's an appropriate goal? Any kind of voice input app has pronunciation and accent abilities that some people have and some people won't. It's important to make a plan for that. And earlier I said, colorblind people, that's 8% of all people. I can't even give you a percentage on localizing your projects, right? Because I'm going to assume most of us are English speakers since this is an English workshop, but look how much the English category is dwarfed by simplified Chinese. And even these other smaller markets are still massive. These are easily 8, 10, 20% of the audience that you're targeting. And if you're, maybe a native Korean speaker or a German speaker, to break into the English market or the Chinese market is just a massive increase in the size of your audience. So localization is always something that we should begin at the beginning. And here's why. It's similar to the colorblind problem. If you're going to publish your app in multiple languages, you can't just put text into your app, right? You need a system where you have, say, a key that says we want the string hello, whatever hello means in that language. we're going to substitute that in for just the letters HELLO. And that allows you in any language later to go to a localization table like this, where you look up, okay, here's the hello key in German, hello, hello in English, bonjour in French. I don't know what that is in Japanese, but by building that infrastructure where you're not using raw English strings anywhere in your application, whether or not you plan to localize, whether or not you think your application will be successful to tap into a larger market and to justify like translating all of the text in your application, it's much easier to plan for these technologies and build the infrastructure to be able to localize your application. And then if you do have a breakaway hit, and suddenly you're like, oh, you know, if we can capture even 1% of the Korean market, that's $7 million. That's a no-brainer, right? But if it costs you $40 million in infrastructure modifications to be able to add any additional languages, then that new market is not as useful. So it's very important to plan localization from the beginning. It's a good idea to have not just the technical infrastructure to do that, but also the game plan of like, you know, how big of the market would we get to before we localize to something. So if you're only planning to make 100 different apps in English, you know, 100 people buy your product, probably not worth translating it to Chinese because you're not going to have the marketing there. You're not going to have the viral spread in a different language. But maybe if you get to 2,000 users, then you start to say, well, that might translate to 600 natural adoptions in Chinese. And then you can start asking, you know, how much text do we have? How much is our app worth? Can we, for 600 users, translate all of our text into Chinese? It's also worth thinking about kind of the art assets in your game. Are there icons or flags or sound files? Is there narration that you'll need to translate? This can all be part of your localization plan. That whether or not you choose to actually localize, it gives you that capability later on and helps you to maximize your audience to be able to reach more and more people with your AR applications. The final thing I want to talk about, which is a lot of times we think about our app, you know, my app, I made it, it costs $4.99 in the App Store. You can download it, you can use it. And we don't really think about that as an accessibility thing, right? There's a cost benefit analysis where you decide we'll get this many sales at this point and that many sales at this point. But ultimately, it's important to think about the platform and the requirements of running your app. So even if my app costs $4.99, if I'm making a HoloLens app, a customer who might be interested in using my app but has to buy a HoloLens is actually paying $3,504.99. And that's, I think, a pretty intimidating purchase for all of us. So there needs to be some additional value beyond your app to justify that. Or maybe your app is worth $3,504.99 to your audience. And if you've asked, who's my audience? Maybe it's an enterprise customer. Maybe it's a Boeing mechanic who is trying to save $3 million an hour by keeping this plane in the air. And so to spend $3,504 to more rapidly repair a jet engine might be totally worth it. But you might also find your answer going the other direction. If I need a new iPhone that has a depth sensing camera to use the AR features of our app, well, for some people that means that your app is a $404.99 upgrade. And sure, they get a phone for using their other tools, their other applications for. But the real deal, right, is if your application can run on an old cracked phone that is just laying around in the kitchen drawer somewhere, then you actually do have a value proposition of your app costing $4.99. And what I'm getting at is there's sort of a socioeconomic capability element that making decisions about your platform and where you publish and who you publish to and the store that you publish in has a really strong relationship with the financial resources of your audience. And understanding how much your audience can spend, not just on your app, but on the capability to run your app is an important part of reaching your audience. If your application is an app for students, obviously you're going to be looking more at this old cracked phone from the kitchen drawer and less at this new iPhone 12. So by looking at all of these things and asking ourselves, who is our audience? What are they capable of? What are they good at? What do they want out of this application? Not just in terms of what do they can or cannot do, but what are they comfortable doing? What makes it easier for them to spend more time in your app? Easier for them to tell their friends about your app or how great it is. Those things are more important in AR than they've ever been before, because our bodies and our ability to communicate with machines are so much more directly related to AR than any other computing technology before. And because of that, what disability is, or inability, or temporary disability means very different things in AR. There's a whole new category of barriers that prevent us from interacting with augmented reality, whether it's on a phone or on a HoloLens or a Leap Motion in some location-based display. It's important to answer these questions in AR. We can solve these problems using multimodal or multi-sensory inputs. We can get bigger localization audiences right at the start and understand how that shapes developing our app. Who are we going to speak to with our app? And it's also important to remember kind of the socioeconomic ability of our audience. Like, what do they have access to? Do they have a stable internet connection? Can they pay for the things that make our app possible to use? So I'm going to wrap my talk there. I'll pass this off to Steph, who's going to tell you a little bit more about our courses and kind of close us out. I really would love to see all of you in a class. I teach the XR Accelerator. I'm also teaching an XR design class coming up. You can see my lectures live in a smaller setting, in a classroom setting. We also do a lot of time in one-on-ones, which is one of my favorite ways to interact with students. You can request me. You want to have me. We also have really great engineers, really great artists from all over the world to help you be a better AR designer. So with that, I will pass it off to Steph and take a step off the stage.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate it. Love your talks here. Jeff, thanks for coming. Our pleasure. Feel free to join us on these other ones. Shane, yes, it's actually live. Definitely. I see you there in the chat. But as Eric mentioned, I'm going to take 5 minutes quickly to wrap it up. If you have any questions that were left out, please toss them into the questions tab. Eric will join us again in the next 5 minutes to answer some of those questions that we have waiting in the questions tab. But anyways, continuing on, we did fly through this content quite quickly. But if you are looking to dive into the world of augmented reality to create something accessible for as many people as possible, we would love to have you with us in any of our courses that we have here at Circus Stream. Whether you're looking to transition careers, bring it back to work, a personal interest of yours that you want to create your own app or start something new. If you have a team looking to bring it in and learn all together about how to do these things, we would love to have you with us in any of our courses. Now, again, we do have our beginner-friendly XR development with Unity program, and this one's mainly for both virtual reality and augmented reality applications, really learning how to create both experiences using C#. It's through 2 classes a week, an hour and a half each class, with a 1-hour private session to work on your personal projects and ideas. Our next course is set to begin on December 1st, followed by every 2 months, and the price of that is $39.50. Again, for this 10-week program, there's no experience required. So newbies, have no fear. We welcome everyone from all walks of life interested to get a better understanding and to create their own experiences. Now, for those of you who are saying, Steph, I'm already very experienced in Unity and C#. I know how to create my own applications and projects. We do have our advanced course, our XR Project Accelerator program. And this is really designed to help advance your skills, help you polish up your projects, bring in these little secrets that you may have not known before by instructors like Eric, and implement it into your projects. It's 6 hours per week, 3 in class, 3 private sessions to work on your personal projects. And the next one is set to start January 5th, and the price of that is $44.50. Now, we do have payment plans and financing options. Jacob, I do see you just tossed that into the chat here as well. From 3-month plans to 6-month plans and 12-month payment plans for the 10-week and the 8-week program. Now, we do have team training opportunities available as well. Could be specific to Unity, the Quest 2, the HoloLens, the artistic side of things. If you have a team looking to learn more together, to create projects together, upskill, I invite you to check out our team training opportunities. It's all live and online. We can create custom schedules, content from our catalog, or something really specific to your interests and needs. So if you're interested in taking a step further, check out our educational programs at circuitstream.com/learning. We have several short courses, some longer in-depth ones. And if you have any questions ever, feel free to reach out to myself, to Kyle, to Vlad, any of our team members. We would be more than happy to help you out there. Now, I would like to take this moment to invite Eric back onto the stage here. I know we have some questions in the questions tab waiting, but let's see what we got here. And I'm just going to lower my desk here, Eric, as we get some questions going.
Yeah.
But
so there's a questions tab up here. The easiest way to ask me questions, put it there, and then also read other people's questions and upvote them. I'll just start going by the most upvoted questions, and then we can talk about those things. So Andrew Long has a great question at the top right now about, he's a web and mobile app UX designer, and he's wondering if Unity is a tool that will let him design and create lower fidelity prototypes. Yes, actually, Unity is a great tool for that. I think coming from a web mobile world, oftentimes we go lower down in the tech stack, to just, well, I'm going to mock it up in HTML or Photoshop and not have that capability. Unity is a really great tool in that not only do your low fidelity prototypes kind of come into the world pretty quick and they're interactive right away, but that also builds up directly in a way that you can then ship those prototypes. And I spent a lot of time working on prototypes that I thought I was going to throw away, and then I realized, I could keep improving that. But if you're building in another technology, a lot of times you get to the point where like that's the end. Like I can't take it any further. I can't ship this, and so you have to start over building again. Both Unity and Unreal, which are sort of the standard tools for building AR and VR apps, are great in that respect. Sometimes when I want to do something a little more low tech, really fast, I'll open up something like Tilt Brush or Google Blocks and just start building shapes. And you can't build any behaviors that way, but if you just want to see what it's like to stand next to a giant pyramid, you can throw that together in 30 seconds in an application. And then the other thing I do is something called body storming, where I get things that kind of roughly correspond to the AR XR controls that I'm trying to build. So I did one interaction where you had this big planet that you were spinning in front of you. That was my idea, and I wanted to see what that was like. And I actually had a telescope on a stand, and we put that telescope there, and I could spin the telescope and imagine that this was a planet. And my design team, we got around and we talked about what it was like to move this thing as a group. And that body storming was a really effective way to instantly, I like reached across the room and grabbed my telescope and said, let's pretend this is a planet. That's a really useful technique for prototyping on really low fidelity way. That's sort of like the paper prototyping of the 3D world. So great question. Unity is a wonderful place to start.
Perfect. And there's one thing that I totally forgot to mention to all of you in the audience today. It really helps us to know how you had enjoyed this workshop. And I would love to know, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this workshop to others? I'm going to publish the poll here. Again, it helps us know whether or not we should continue creating content, different workshops around. So please let us know in the polls how likely you are to recommend this workshop to someone else. Thank you. Sorry for stopping you there, Eric.
No worries. No worries. Polls tab is right next to the questions tab. So Esther had a question about, there are a lot of design case studies about AR and VR. I mean, this is an area that is exploding. And what is a good way to get started on a passion project? So, I mean, obviously, our course. It's a 10-week course that you can go from zero to making a project. And then I recently helped develop what we call the XR Accelerator, where if you have an XR app that you want to get to a point of shipping, we will spend a bunch of time with you, one-on-one hours. You get 24 one-on-one hours with an expert like myself, specifically talking about your app and how we can make your app better and ship it. So those are great tools. There's a lot of resources out there. You can dive into a different toolkit. You can also buy like individual time. Like if you don't want to take a course yet, you could just contract with CircuitStream to talk to one of us as an expert, and we can help you solve some of those like pre-planning questions, like what skills do you need? We'd love to have those kind of conversations. Feel free to reach out to Steph or Kyle or Dehan or anybody you've already been talking about. They will give you all sorts of good free advice for how to get to what you want to be doing.
Perfect. Now Nishant had a question here, and I saw him pop it up when we were on the colorblind stuff, when everyone's trying to guess what number was in the bubble there. Do you know if that middle one, I don't know if you recall, was it an 8, a 2, or a 3?
Oh, let me check my slide.
But Nishant's question either way was, is the colorblind mode like a post process, or does it modify the textures?
The middle one was a 2.
It was a 2. It's for the audience there.
That's the hardest one for me to see too. I recently, while I was prepping this talk, I wanted to know a little bit more about how these work. And it's interesting, there's actually some that are that work oppositely, that if you have normal color vision, it's just this chaotic field of busyness. But if you have color blindness, the busyness is just in the colors, and you actually can make out numbers from the contrast alone. And I was like, oh wow, because I looked at them and I was like, am I colorblind? Like I didn't know. But then they're like, no, they're the revealing kind instead of the disappearing kind. So I think the question probably is more specific to, I think, the Destiny example. So I think in that case it was largely texture swaps. So we had different icons that had different, like basically the image traded out for a different colored image. But there were also some shader changes that I think took place on the 3D model. So like if you were an invader, right? Like your armor was red, but in colorblind mode, it was sort of a magenta color that had a different contrast ratio. And so it would rely more on contrast than on the color tone. There are different approaches that go both through post-processing and through kind of swapping the visual elements themselves. This, I think, depends a lot on your specific implementation. So in a video game, you probably don't want to do a post-processing effect, because then you end up with some really strange things where like the water isn't blue anymore, the water shifts to green, which colorblind people will be able to tell, like there's something wrong there. And what you really want to be doing is color shifting iconography or important symbolic elements. So like the color of the armor, right, is symbolic of some meaning in the game. But there's some other thing, like a fire truck is red. You don't want to color shift that to some other color. It still needs to be red. Mm-hmm. Yeah, both approaches work, and it just depends on what you're doing. Whereas, say, like icons in an application, a color shift, like a post-processing color shift on a bunch of icons is probably fine because they're abstract symbols that don't mean anything. So what does it matter what color they are?
That makes sense. Perfect. And I know you answered a question by Esther. Was it the Amazon shopping question that you were touching on by chance?
No, let's talk about the Amazon shopping question.
Cool. So the question was, I'm interested in working for teams like Amazon Shopping. Does she still need to learn Unity for that?
I can't speak specifically to the Amazon shopping AR team because I have never worked at Amazon before. But the specific technology that different teams use is almost always based on a game engine. And there's really only 3 choices, and there's really only 2. So it's Unity is sort of the biggest player, and I would estimate maybe 60% of AR apps are built in Unity. Mm-hmm. 35% are probably built in Unreal. I personally love Unreal. Like my whole career, I've been using Unreal, so the transition to doing XR and Unreal was very easy for me. Both of those are very competitive products. Lumberyard is sort of a distant third choice, which I only bring up because Amazon published Lumberyard, so maybe somebody there is using Lumberyard. But normally I wouldn't even mention it. But even if you are interested in working for a place that uses a completely custom ad hoc game engine, it's like a tool set, right, to build AR. Learning Unity or Unreal is going to be a lot of the same paradigms, right? If you're familiar with 3D Studio Max and Maya, knowing Max makes Maya so much easier to learn. If you're familiar with Photoshop, it's going to be so much easier to learn Illustrator or CorelDRAW.
Right.
Like these are very transferable skills. So if you don't already work at a place that already has a specific tool chain in mind, Unity is a great place to start. Like that's going to be square one, so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Right. I did recently see an Amazon shopping video on LinkedIn, tossing stuff into the shopping cart, scanning right away, take it out, unscans it. Future's crazy.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Then we've got one here from Ritesh, and the question's really like, is there a voice recognition module available in Unity? I was going to try and answer that, but I'll try and leave it to you there.
Yes, there are several. So the one I have the most experience with is built into the Mixed Reality Toolkit. Microsoft publishes the Mixed Reality Toolkit, and it's very useful for developing on HoloLens 2, which is where I have most of my AR experience from. And the voice recognition there is powered by, I would get the service name wrong, but the Azure Voice service. And it's pretty great. Like, honestly, I am forever frustrated by voice recognition on Android and iPhone and PC. Like, I don't know what like my voice seems like a pretty normal American voice to me.
Yep.
But I just am always frustrated. The HoloLens 2 actually is the best voice recognition I've ever used.
Really?
To a degree that I actually want to use it. Like no other voice do I want to use unless I'm driving or something, right? And I think some of that is the microphones in the HoloLens are pointed right at your face, and they're really high quality microphones. Whereas like my phone on my desk here is picking up all the ambient noise out of the room. And there may also just be some secret sauce in there that Cortana understands my voice better. I'm not sure.
Fabulous. We got Mr. Glenn Simmons here with a question, and he'd like to create AR marketing experiences for clothing brands on Instagram. Are there any tools or tips you would recommend as he's just starting up? How would he use Unity in that process? So probably a lot to cover here, but what are your thoughts?
No, it's a great question. I love that idea. I mean, like AR clothes, right? It's like if you walk up to somebody and they've got like, you like pull up the clothing label and you get your phone and you scan it and like some AR rainbow thing comes out and like becomes part of the scene around the person wearing this clothing. Like that's super rad. Like that's the only thing that would make me remember a clothing brand. So are there any tools or tips? It's a very ambitious idea. The first thing you should start out with is, figure out how to place a hologram on the surface. And that, just like getting to that point, that's like the hello world of the AR world. Can I hold up my phone and get a little man to walk around on the table? That's a great initial point. And then one of the things about like kind of these cross-industry ideas like you're describing of like an AR marketing experience is, first you need to master augmented reality in its simplest form. Right? It's a ball rolling across the table. But then you're going to have to do a lot of tinkering in the physical space of like, how does the clothing identify itself to the AR device? Those are problems that need a lot of innovation, a lot of experimentation, and require a lot of like multidisciplinary technologist skills. So first, nail that AR piece, and then I think like that's once you understand that, then you can use your expertise in marketing or clothing brands or, clothing design, like fashion design, I guess is what it's called, to blend those two things, right? I talk with a lot of people who are expert in one field, like nursing or teaching or, like I was saying, Boeing, repairing jet engines. And their question is, how do I do this thing with AR? And as an innovator, as a pioneer, it's not good enough to just be an expert at nursing, right? You need to be an expert at both of those things, integrate those things. So upskill and build those things. You don't have to be the best AR developer in the world, but you need to have the foundations there to be able to implement and hack and put together some prototypes. And then once you can walk into somebody with funding and say, hold the phone in just exactly this right way. It only works when I hold it here in bright light, and then you see what I'm talking about. That's when they give you $1 million, and then you can hire the best developer in the world, right? So that's how it gets started. Unity is going to be, kind of like I answered in the other question. Like square one, great place to start. That's how you get a ball to roll across the table and fall to the floor and bounce. And that's going to be such a rewarding experience. You may get distracted from your original goal and just go do that. But that's where I would start. That's where I have started, and it's been very fruitful going that direction.
Fabulous. Thank you. Let's see what we got. And Zachary here had a great question. I was waiting to get this one going. How do you know if you were targeting the wrong audience and not just making an inaccessible app?
Interesting.
Right.
Let me think about how to break that down, right? Because if it's the wrong audience, I think how I would understand wrong audience is they value something different. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're targeting kids with a calculus app. Calculus with fifth graders, they're probably not interested, right? Because they're not to the point where they're learning calculus. They value different things. But if you're targeting college students with an AR app about calculus, they value being able to pass their courses. So that's what I would say. That was how I would say wrong audience, right? An inaccessible app is somebody who values what you offer, but they simply can't do it. A lot of times this, in traditional software, this is just like, if you've ever opened an application and just been like, what is this? You run away, right? It's a bad user experience. It's bad UI when somebody who is an expert in the field can come to your application and not know what to do or to need specialized training. And I think the clearest way to understand whether your application is inaccessible or targeting the wrong audience is to do user studies. Find that person who is exactly your audience. Find a mathematics professor and say, hey, I know you know the most about calculus. Can you use my app and tell me what you think? And if they're like, it's too hard to use, then you have an inaccessible app. If they struggle to use it, if the only people who use, there are some niche communities around things like, chiptune synthesizers or AI deepfake software, where like in the entire world, there's 100 people who know how to use this software, and like they just post all their like Rick roll finished by an AI videos on YouTube. That's probably because the application is inaccessible. Mm-hmm. Because I would love to like put Michael Jackson Thriller into that deepfake thing and then have like Ron Swanson dance to Thriller. If it was easy, I value that. But the reality of tools like Open Jukebox is they're too hard for people like me to use, and so I never bother to learn how Open Jukebox works. So that kind of actual user, not really feedback, but like observation of actual users is how I would differentiate between targeting the wrong audience and targeting the right audience, but making it inaccessible to that audience. But great, that's a great way to like kind of parse that question into two different.
Right. Yeah. Great question, Zach. Thank you. And then it looks like we might only have one question here, unless there's more in the chat that I'm missing out on. And, for you, Eric, seeing that you're one of the leaders and mentors here at Circuit Stream, do you cover the concepts on what makes an idea scalable or viable for profit?
Should we do a business success in AR?
I think we should.
So scalable is definitely a thing that we talk about. So my background working on games like Destiny and MMOs, scalability was super important, right? Because our game systems only work upwards of 10,000 players, and like the computational cost per player is real high. So scalability is enormous in that industry, the like massively multiplayer industry. So that's something I care a lot about. How to scale is both a technology problem and a business problem.
Yep.
I was talking with some buddies the other night about how you may have 100 incredibly dedicated fans, but if you monetize in a way that those 100 people can't pay you to make your product, you're gonna fail. Yep. But maybe you find a way to make those 100 fans pay you $1,000 a month, and you're set. You don't need it anymore, right? So scalability is both a technology problem and a business problem. I have an expertise in the technology part, not so much the business part. I haven't run any successful businesses, at least. And then I think viability for profit is I don't think you're going to find that answer anywhere for AR, because this industry is so new. Nobody has an idea what's viable. Like everything could be viable. It's a wild west, right? Yep. And like part of the reason that I love my job is teaching this is because there's no way that I could go explore all possible viable things. But every student that I talk to, like I said, a lot of people come in with some expertise in some market, and they see this opportunity where they're like, we're wasting millions of dollars by like not cleaning these machines properly because we don't have enough people to train. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but I can teach you how to train people to do that on a HoloLens, and then you'll save your millions of dollars, right? So I think it's a lot up to you. Like it's up to you to invent the viability, to find the profitability, but we can teach you how to harness AR and VR in a way that allows you to capture that profit.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. No, then that's what I was thinking as well. Like scalability, two sides to it, definitely possible. But as you were saying, right, the profitability could be anything really. It's like you said, it's so new. It's so new.
Discovering new profit areas every day in this field.
Yeah. Now, new question here by Glenn again. Why do some AR assets look very pixelated, whereas other look very smooth and of higher quality? Does this happen in the game engine or building the 3D asset in like Blender?
There are a lot of answers to that question. Some of them just come down to the craftsmanship of the person who made it. In AR and VR, the technical demands of 3D graphics are a lot higher. I mean, the most basic reason is you draw the picture once for your left eye and you draw the picture once for your right eye. Even on your phone, you're overlaying 3D on video, so there's some added complexity there. So there is a greater computational burden just for the hardware to be able to draw this thing that you're seeing, and so that makes that like computational requirement makes the craftsmanship that much harder, right? That like this thing has to look good and also run at frame rate, and you can't sacrifice the frame rate because you will literally make people nauseous. And so a lot of times what gets sacrificed is the quality.
Right.
And I think it's been interesting because in traditional games, right, which is where all of these technologies come from, there's just been a push from how do we make better looking assets? But then as soon as you transition to VR and AR, what you're doing is you're skipping backwards 5 or 10 years in computational capabilities. And there's this smaller niche of artists who have spent their careers developing not just better looking assets, but more performant, better looking assets. And so that's like a small skill group, right? And so those people are extra valuable in AR and VR. And those are the people that I think make the difference between a beautiful, smooth running, high quality thing. Like I was blown away in Valve's lab for Half-Life Alyx. How in the world does this run on my computer? Beat Saber doesn't really look like much of anything. Great frame rates. I think those people are the differentiators between those two different kind of products. And then sometimes people are just bad and they make ugly things, but that's a part of the growth process. So All of that contributes to it.
Perfect. And then new question here from Andrew Long. Can you speak to accessibility considerations for general partial blindness? Large font sizes, size of elements, etc.
It sounds like you might be more of an expert at this than I am. So I tackled a little bit of this when I was working in games. I work mostly in action games, and there's always sort of you have to do the cost benefit analysis of like in action games, people who have general partial blindness probably don't play a lot of action games because they demand your target recognition. They demand that you can be able to spot these things. And those are so fundamental of the gameplay that people who are not interested in rapid target recognition just aren't your audience, right? And people with general partial blindness can't do that. So they're not going to have a fun time playing your game. So no matter how accessible your font sizes are, they're not playing your game anyway.
Right.
So I haven't had much experience with partial blindness because that's my background. In working in my tools work, I've relied a lot more on sort of standard Windows visibility things like magnification and adjustable layouts. But those are definitely things that need to be addressed in AR and VR. And we talked a lot at Microsoft about in normal applications we measure font size in points, right? It's basically just like how many pixels tall is this thing, and then we expect people to just get closer to their monitor if they need it bigger. But in AR, you are placing buttons in 3D space, and so the size of a font, whether it's up here or over there across the room, is dependent a lot more on the dimensionality of your application and not just how many pixels you decided to scale this button to. So we talk a lot about points per degree. And so we measure the total field of view of the HoloLens display. And then if you may sometimes dynamically scale the size of the text as it moves closer to you so that it's always the number of degrees that are visible rather than the number of pixels that are visible. And I think those kind of differing ways to understand text and size of elements and the way people have vision is more important in AR than in computing. Or maybe it's not really any different than like billboard designers have always been thinking about in terms of like how far away and how many degrees and things, whereas being limited by computer monitors has made traditional computing's approach to partial blindness very, very specialized. Right? So yeah, those are great questions. I'm sorry I can't tell you to do this, and that. But yeah, those are techniques that you can do to cope with general blindness if that's a significant part of your audience.
Makes sense. Perfect. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. Thank you, Eric, for the answer there. So looks like that's it in the questions tab here. Let me just take a look in the chat, see if there's anything new that we've got going on here. But I was keeping an eye on it. Doesn't look like that there's any other questions from what I see. So with this, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time. Oh, wait. Whoa. Looks like we do have another question. Whoa, we do. This is for you specifically, Eric. Eric, what's the most cutting edge use of AR you've seen so far?
Wow, cutting edge. I don't like rank cutting edgeness as like a category. Again, like my background as a game designer, it's always about the emotional experience. Mm-hmm. And so it seems really simple and it is in no way cutting edge, but I've tried out this HoloLens app that lets you like grow a garden around your house and you just like tap the walls and these plants come out and like crawl up your walls. And like that spoke to me in a really powerful way because I used to have a bunch of houseplants, but then I became a digital nomad. And so now there are no plants anywhere in my life because they do not fit in my suitcase. And I was like, that solves something emotionally for me. And so like, I think that's how I have AR applications index, just like how do they emotionally speak to me? I think cutting edgeness, like one of the really cool things that's happening is like instantaneous visualization of complex models. So I'm gonna break that down and say, if I'm building a factory, right, and I have this arm that moves car parts from one conveyor belt to the other, right? In the past, what you did is you built a giant wooden or clay arm and you put it in that factory, and you're like, I have visualized the robot arm and I can see it moving, and we have like 4 guys here who turn it, and then, all right, looks good, let's build it. But because if say you build the wooden version and then you're like, oh, when it moves, it hits that load-bearing pillar and the building's going to collapse, then you build it differently, right? But you don't realize that until you see it in the space. So now with HoloLens, you can put on your HoloLens and see a 3D model from your CAD program rendered in the cloud with like incredible fidelity in the space, exactly as it will. You don't need the 4 guys to like turn it. You just pinch and pan, and you're like, oh, it hits that pillar. And then you, without even taking off your device, you flip this up, you drag some things around in your computer, you hit save, you flip it down, oh, it doesn't hit the pillar anymore. And that's kind of transformative production that I think that all industrial design, all vehicle design, all architecture is going to be using these kind of previs technologies that allow you to experience it at scale in the space where it exists. Already the architecture industry and real estate industry have like gobbled up VR as fast as they can, because you can walk through a building that isn't built yet.
Right.
And as far as like selling buildings, like there is nothing more compelling than walking through the building and then you're like, okay, yeah, I want this. Right. Before it was just a big guess. So I think that's probably the most cutting edge thing. There's all sorts of weird experimental stuff that's like beyond that, but those things don't impress me until they're like real and available to consumers. Yeah. So they don't make my list either.
And I was going to echo the same thing. The HoloLens, for myself at least, has been cutting edge in terms of AR. Like the things you can do with it, phenomenal. Like what Airbus is doing, what Philips is doing, these construction architecture companies, other medical companies. It's crazy. It's crazy. So thank you, Eric. But that finally looks like it might be the last question here. Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us on another Circuit Stream workshop and webinar. We have another one this Thursday. We have probably one next week as well. So feel free to join us for as many workshops and webinars as you all can. Kenyero, Igor, thanks for joining us. I believe you guys are in Belgium. Thank you. We do have an open house tomorrow. Day, I'm calling it out in the chat. Join us for our open house, free to join another workshop webinar where you're going to learn more about what we do here at Circuit Stream, what courses we have, the success stories, what is possible to create and do, what the future looks like with this technology. We'll cover everything and anything we can in that open house tomorrow. So check out the link tossed in the chat there. We'd love to see you all there. Virtual burgers, virtual drinks for all. And again, that's it. But again, thank you everyone for joining us for the workshop. Eric, it's always an absolute pleasure to have you hosting this with myself. Thank you very much again for your time. And for everyone, again, have a wonderful morning, evening, night, wherever you're located right now. I wish you all the best. Stay healthy, stay warm, stay safe, and hope to see you all very soon. Again, thank you and take it easy.
Bye.